Sure, thanks Tim. If you just bear with me because I'm going to stop sharing and then reshare. Just bear with me. Okay, so initially I'll just share volume 4. I don't propose to work through this line by line or word by word, but as Tim references there, the two documents that particularly refer to the pricing submission of this procurement are volume 4 and appendix 2. Volume 4 largely acts as a guidance document to appendix 2, so strongly suggest that you work your way through volume 4 before attempting to complete appendix 2, which is the spreadsheet. But I'll just work through this very quickly. So volume 4 just breaks down each of the 4 lists. So as Tim suggests, the actual application form and the quality questions, you only need to complete those once as a provider. But if you are applying to more than one list, so residential and nursing and supported living, for example, you do need to make sure that you're completing the pricing submission, so appendix 2, for both of those lists, so that it's one document but has 2 tabs, and I'll show you that. But just to make sure that you're very clear that you do need to submit the pricing for both lists, or even all 4 lists should you be applying across all 4. But the application form itself is per provider. So this just walks you through each of the lists in terms of the guidance documents. The main focus around residential and nursing care is the implementation of the actual cost of care rate across North Yorkshire, and you've got a table within volume 4 here that shows you the direct care hours that relate to actual cost of care, but are actually the direct care hours that you will submit your weekly rate for if you do not accept the actual cost of care, or if the actual cost of care doesn't apply. So you do need to make sure that you're referring to this these direct care hours within volume 4 when submitting your rates for residential and nursing. We just scroll down, it talks about home-based support there. So if you've attended the home-based support webinars, you'll know that home-based support now applies to all services delivered within a person's home, be they regulated or non-regulated. So you'll submit rates for home-based support services via the appendix 2 document. If you're a current provider, it's a similar principle to currently, in that you'll submit urban, rural and super rural rates, and there's maps for those included within the procurement document, so that you know across the large geography of North Yorkshire, each of our district localities has a map. It's a bit like a fried egg is the easiest way for me to describe it, and it shows you geographically where the urban, rural and super rural areas are within that locality. So your yolk is your urban area, your white is your rural area, and anything beyond that is super rural. So that will just help you to break down your rates, and we just recognise that in those super rural areas you may need to think about different rates for delivering services in those areas, and those rates need to be subdivisible by 4. The document just makes reference to the council's 15-minute call guidance. We are seeking a move away from that where possible, although we recognise that 15-minute calls are appropriate for such things as welfare calls and practical support. We don't envisage to be commissioning 30-minute calls for any personal care services, but do make sure that you reference make reference to that 15-minute call guidance as well when completing this procurement and the appendix 2. We just move further down, just talks about community-based support there. So the biggest change here is that community-based support providers will be asked to submit an hourly rate for their services, whereas previously we've accepted session rates. So it'll be an hourly rate with the ability for you as a provider to submit a minimum number of hours that you require a person to attend your services. But we're just trying to move away from that standard standard sessions and session rates to move towards a bit of flexibility within community-based support services. So quite a big change there for providers to think about hourly rates. And again, as Jill said at the beginning, any particular questions that you have about pricing for your services, we just ask that those come through the clarification process rather than this webinar specifically. And then we've got supported living, just some detail around supported living there. So supported living and home-based support services, again, I'll show you in a second, but we've provided some average, the average current rates for services, and providers are being asked to submit rates within 10% of that, where rates are above 10%, higher than that average that we have provided, then there's a request for some rationale within the appendix 2. So if you just bear with me, I'll stop sharing that and I'll move directly onto the appendix 2 itself. If Tim or Jill could just give me a nod to say that I'm sharing the appendix 2. Yeah.
Yeah, it could probably do with being a bit bigger, I think, Hannah, maybe.
Okay, just bear with me. Is
yeah,
that okay?
I
don't want to make it too big, so I'm scrolling around too much, but yeah, does that look okay?
I think so. It does to me. I think so. It's fine.
Perfect. Okay. So as I say, volume 4 is almost acts a bit like your guidance document for your pricing submission, and then the actual submission itself is appendix 2, which is this spreadsheet here. It's one spreadsheet and it has 4 tabs at the bottom. So you'll see the tabs here for with the 4 different lists: nursing and residential, home-based support, supported living, and community-based support services. So I'll just start with the nursing and residential services. So as I touched on just now, the council has completed an actual cost of care exercise for all residential and nursing services for people over 65 years. So if you're delivering that type of service, you'll be aware of that actual cost of care exercise and the implementation of it. So what we are anticipating as part of this re-procurement is that costs will reflect the actual cost of care where the actual cost of care applies. So the first table within this tab is asking you to, if the actual cost of care rate applies to your services, to mark to suggest that you accept the actual cost of care as is stated here. Or if you don't accept the actual cost of care where it applies, which is to these services for over 65s, you propose your rate in column D here. Obviously, the actual cost of care rate only applies to services for people over 65. So where you're delivering services for under 65s, you will just propose your rate here, because the actual cost of care rate is not applicable. What you just need to be mindful of here is, even where you're not accepting the actual cost of care or the actual cost of care rate doesn't apply, you must make sure that the weekly rate you're submitting in column D is a weekly rate for the direct care hours listed in volume 4. So the table that I just showed you in volume 4, you need to make reference to that when you're providing that weekly rate, because it's a weekly rate for those direct care hours that you're submitting in column D. Okay, so if we just move further down, this table here is for all providers. So if you accept the actual cost of care, or you don't accept the actual cost of care, or it doesn't apply, we're asking you to break down the weekly rate that you're submitting. So you'll provide a breakdown of how you've reached your weekly rate for those direct care hours. Then what we're asking you to do is to provide an hourly rate for any additional one-to-one support. So additional one-to-one support will only be commissioned where a person is assessed as requiring over and above the direct care hours stated in volume 4. So what we're asking you to do is provide an hourly rate for those hours that are over and above, and those, as I say, will be by assessment, and we will pay this agreed hourly rate that you'll submit at the point of application. Okay, and then I'm just moving to this box at the bottom, which is fairly standard across all of the tabs. So where you do not accept the actual cost of care where it applies, or if the actual cost of care rate doesn't apply to your services, we're asking you to provide a rationale for your rate. So we're asking you to consider market forces and just allow us to ensure value for money in accepting any rates over and above or out with the actual cost of care. We're asking you to provide a rationale for your weekly rate. We're not disputing that there might be good reason for the rate that you submit, but we're just asking you to provide that rationale the rate that you've submitted if it falls out with the actual cost of care rate. So that's just the box there for you to do that. That'll just allow us to complete an assessment of that rate, and if we require any further information to allow us to complete that assessment, we'll do that via the clarification process on your tender, direct with you as the provider. Okay, I'm just going to move through and take questions at the end, I think, if that's okay. So I'll just move on to the home-based support list tab. This probably looks quite busy on the screen, so apologies. This is not largely different to previously, in that, as I mentioned, we're asking you to submit rates against each of the different services that are delivered under this list. So this list is for all services in a person's home. So that's regulated personal care, generic and complex, practical support, sitting services, both regulated and non-regulated, and then living care. So for each of those different services, we've got an urban, I'll just scroll across, urban, rural and super rural. It looks very busy, but hopefully when you come to fill it in, it's not quite as complex as it looks. And then you've got the different localities down the left-hand side, recognising that the cost of delivering care may vary across locality and may vary according to urban, rural and super rural delivery. So what the rates in red are here are the current averages that we are paying for delivering these types of services by locality and by urban, rural and super rural. What we're asking you to do is provide your proposed hourly rate in the box alongside that. Where that rate falls above 10% of the locality average, or indeed below the 10% of the locality average, we're asking you to provide a rationale of that here. So in the same way as residential and nursing, we can, as a council, we can complete an assessment of that rate, considering market forces, value for money and the services you're delivering. So where it falls out with that 10% of the locality average stated in red, we're asking you for that rationale there. And again, you'll see that we're asking you to provide a breakdown of that hourly rate here. This breakdown is the standard cost, based on the standard costing model used by the Home Care Association. So if you're familiar with that, you will hopefully be familiar with some of these headings in terms of your costing model. Okay, just move now onto the supported living tab. So again, we're asking for hourly rates. So you will provide an hourly rate for individual and core support as defined in the service specification. So individual support being the one-to-one support to the person within the home, and the core support being that support that's to the property and shared across individuals. But you'll provide an hourly rate for individual and core support, and an hourly rate for your sleep-in support. And then we're asking you to just state whether there are the number of hours that you deliver as part of your sleep-in, if that varies from 8, which is fairly standard across the county. So if that differs, we just need you to specify that there. We've provided a county-wide average rate of the current rates for supported living. The reason we haven't broken it down by locality is that there was negligible variance across the county, so we provided that county-wide average rate there. We've provided you with the definition of intensive or enhanced support, just so that you're clear about the circumstances under which we would pay that higher rate for intensive or enhanced support. We've just asked you on here as well just to provide the details of the current properties that you have within North Yorkshire, the current supported living properties. So where there are a standard number of core hours and the number of hours per sleep-in against each of those properties, just so that we're clear when we're brokering placements within those properties, the number of core hours that's available to a person should they move into that property. Again, the common feature around asking you to break down your rate, and again, that's in line with the HCA costing model. And then that familiar box at the end here, which just asks you to provide a rationale for your rate if it falls out with 10% of that county-wide average that we've provided above. So some similarities there between the home-based support and supported living pricing submission. And then lastly, I'll just move on to the community-based support tab. So as I say, the most significant change here to the submission for providers of community-based support services is the provision of an hourly rate as opposed to a session rate. We've just provided the definitions here that are lifted directly from the service specification, just for your reference, and you will provide an hourly rate against each of those types of services. We recognise that you may charge different rates for different levels of service, low, intermediate and high, and you will need to make direct reference to the service specification for the definitions of low, intermediate and high services. You'll provide the hourly rate and the minimum number of hours per day if there are a minimum number of hours that you require people to attend. Just to make clear, as previously with community-based support services, that prices submitted shouldn't include charges for meals or for transport. They're not included within the costing for your services, so you need to make sure that you're not including those costs within the hourly rate. And then again, just a breakdown here. I have noticed a question in the chat actually, and I'm just noticing, I was struggling to see where that was an issue, but actually I think we have got a typo here on this form, Tim. I'm just noticing that it says weekly rate here, where actually we're referring to hourly rate throughout, and I think that references one of the questions that's come through in the chat. So I just think we just need to pick that up, because we are very clear that it is an hourly rate that you are submitting as part of the community to join the community-based support list. So I think we just need to pick that up as part of clarification, Tim. Okay. I think that's it from me. Happy to take any questions.